What's up, everybody? The Uncanny Omar here, and today I have a very special guest with me. It is the legendary Erik Larsen. Sir, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
My pleasure.
So,
Sorry, my room is in such disarray, but that's just the way I am.
no, but do you know where everything is in your room, though? That's
I
the
have no
question.
idea.
You have
I have no idea. I have a rough approximation of a portion of it, and then the rest is complete and utter chaos.
complete and utter chaos. I think most people think better like that, though. Like, complete and utter
It's just
chaos.
the boxes are mostly misc, and that's complete madness.
I love that you call it misc. That's awesome. So, thank you again for joining me. Let's a little bit about who you are in case for some reason somebody out there doesn't know. This is Erik Larsen. He has
All
been
right.
drawing, writing, creating comic books for a very long time. Very
Yeah,
long time.
it's getting to be a while now.
So, and
Okay.
he's one of the founders of Image Comics. He's one of the guys that walked away from Marvel um, back in the 1991, right? 91?
92, 92.
92.
So we're looking at 28 years at this point.
28 years, my goodness.
Good Lord, I know. I've been in the business for 10 years prior to that, so
Uh-huh.
it's been a while.
Because you've had some things at DC, and then things at Marvel, and then
Mhm.
Image, and then that took off with
Yeah, and then
Savage Dragon.
every now and then I'll get the urge to step back into either of those realms and do some more stuff just to scratch an itch.
Yeah,
So
it's always exciting to see your name on something. I'm like, oh, Erik Larsen's back. He's writing Wolverine. That's what?
what the hell is going on? Life doesn't make sense anymore.
But I remember when Savage Dragon 1 came out, I was so excited. I loved it. I followed that series up until the point when I stopped collecting every comic book, right? And yeah, I know. I walked away. I found other interests, or I was broke. Really, is what happened. I was broke. Um, but one of the coolest things about Erik Larsen's Savage Dragon, and we just talked about, really, is that the character ages in real time, or the stories are aged in real time.
The stories progress. Yeah. So at this point, the book stars the original Savage Dragon's son, and his son is 23 years old, married, and has children. So a lot of things have happened. I mean, the book at this point is set in Toronto, Ontario, Canada,
Hmm.
and just a lot of changes have taken place over the years. It's like, well, what the hell's going on here? But it's been interesting to be able to kind of progress things in that way. One of the things when you're reading Marvel DC comics for years and years and years is you do get to a point where you're suddenly going, oh, I'm older than Peter Parker now, or I'm older than this character or that character. And a lot of times fans will kind of lament that, oh, wouldn't it be cool if these characters grew up with me? Wouldn't that be awesome if Spider-Man would get married and Spider-Man would have kids and Spider-Man would blah, 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 pass on the mantle to the next young buck who can take over the role. And they really can't do that because they need to keep their characters fresh and young for generations to come. And they can't count on successive creators coming in and creating the next Spider-Man or the next iconic character that's going to endure for decades to come. So they kind of have to keep the Green Lantern alive, and they kind of need to keep all those characters going for forever, kind of. Which and that's kind of why a lot of readers eventually wander off, as they feel like, oh, these characters are just spinning their wheels. They're not getting anywhere. And they're not going through the things that I'm going through. And so I was able to kind of go, well, let me try that out and see how that works, and try this in my own book and see if those kinds of stories can actually work. And there are numerous problems when you do things that way. And I found a lot of them. It's like when you're going and putting in subplots for issues, and you're like, I want to build this up for a few issues, and then there's going to be a payoff. It's like, so if you got a character who's getting on a bus in one issue and arrives someplace 2 issues later, it's like, they've been riding a bus for 2 months. That's crazy. And villains scheming and wanting to have some big plans, and you kind of realize at some point, so they've been just standing there staring out of the window with their arms folded behind them for like 6 months now. What the hell? And it doesn't, there's a lot of little things like that don't really work super well. Little kids have speech impediments, but how long do they really have speech impediments? It can be a matter of a couple of months where they, say some word in a kind of cute way, and then suddenly they don't have that anymore. And it's like, well, that's a fun thing to play with as a writer on a book, having those kind of things go on with characters, but you can't have those forever if you're going to set your book in real time, because everybody's got to grow and everything's got to progress. You got to keep track of how old is everybody, and how long do people actually have braces, if they have braces, and how just keep a flow chart of how old all the characters are, and where they are, and how long their hair is. And there just ends up being a lot of things that go into it, and it can get really complicated. But it's also a lot of fun.
You're absolutely right. Like, it's nothing. It's something people don't think about. Like, well, when we're introduced to the concept of Days of Future Past, right? Like, Days of Future Past shows the X-Men in the future, their age, even though Days of Future Past took place way before 2020, right? But it's a fun concept. But to get there, like you mentioned earlier, to get from point A to point B, that's a different kind of ride.
It's very different. When John Byrne did his Generations thing, he was able to go, I'm going to grab these periods of time, and they're going to be 10 years apart, and you're going to be able to see how much things have changed from one scene to the next. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't do any of the heavy lifting there. The heavy lifting is the slog of actually going that 10 years and seeing all of those changes take place over time. And that's a process to go through, and there's no real easy shortcuts unless you're going to do those jump cuts of, hey, now it's 15 years later, and look at that, he's got a beard now. And it's like, all right. That's cool.
I think it's awesome and you stuck to your guns. Like, that's the best part. It's like, no matter how many times I've seen your name at Marvel, when you go back and do something, like I remember when you went back to do Nova, or like I mentioned, Wolverine. It's nice that you go back to your character that you love, and you're like, I'm going to keep telling this story.
Yeah, well, it's my baby, and whenever I go and stick my foot in other pools, and it's always like, oh, this is why I'm not doing this anymore. It's such a pain in the ass working with other people and counting on other people, and what, I don't get final say on the coloring or the lettering or whatever. It's just all this stuff that drives me nuts.
One of my favorite stories that you and I have talked about in the past, but in case somebody doesn't know this, is the story of how you you are co-creator of Venom's tongue. It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah,
and I hope that movie gives you a fraction of its money that it makes. We use that much tongue in this much scene, so we got to give Larsen his cut.
Yeah, yeah. If only I got something from that. No,
So
that was
how did that happen?
all right. So the first time Venom appeared, he looked kind of like a real guy, but with a just a mask, and you could see his smile. But his teeth weren't sharp. They weren't crazy. They weren't anything. Second time he appeared, his teeth were suddenly sharper, whatever. And then I took over the book, and Todd had done a cover for a collection, and the collection was Spider-Man versus Venom. And on the cover, he had his mouth open, and you could
Mhm.
see his tongue. And I didn't buy it because I had all the comics. I didn't need the comics that were reprinted there, and it was just a cover, so who cares? Um, but it stuck in my brain that, hey, Todd's giving him a tongue now. I'm going to give him a. I'm going to expand on that and make the tongue a little bigger and a little crazier. And so I did. Like, okay, he's giving him sharper, longer teeth. I'm going to giving him more sharp teeth and a crazier jaw and a bigger jaw. And now I'm going to have this tongue that's going to be whipping around. And it wasn't. And I would give Todd credit for, oh no, Todd's the guy who started with the tongue thing. He did that on this trade paperback cover. It wasn't until the internet and years later that suddenly I saw the book, and it was like, oh no, he just had his mouth open. You could see that there was just this little red dot of a tongue. He acknowledged that the guy had a tongue, but he didn't do anything with it at all. So it was like, oh crap, it was me, but it's just me completely misinterpreting and misremembering what I'd seen. So it's like, all right, put me
I
down for that.
I remember when you took over the book and I saw the Venom, and it had the cover of just the reflection of Spider-Man in Venom's eyes, and his eyes look crazy, and his tongue and the green slime coming out, and I'm like, man, Venom is really evolving into this dark creature, like from its alien background. This is awesome, and it all comes from something that you accidentally thought you saw. That's such a cool story.
Yeah. It all comes from me just screwing up. Like,
And
no.
now it's part of the damn character's image. Man, you can't go anywhere without the Venom tongue. Artists these days do not draw Venom like McFarlane draws Venom. They draw Venom the way that you drew him with his tongue out.
Yeah. I'm sorry. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. If you do like it, okay, more power to you.
Oh no, I love it.
I know that David Nicolini was in his scripts would just make, no, fans like the humanity of the character inside of this. Don't make him monstrous and all that sort of stuff. And I just was like, I don't think you're right. I'm such a dick. I'm like the worst guy to collaborate with. There we go.
Well, speaking of collaborations, you stuck on Spider-Man for a little while with David Michelinie. You drew the Return of the Sinister Six, which is one of my favorite stories in Amazing Spider-Man. But you, sir, took over Todd after he left Adjectiveless Spider-Man,
Yeah.
and you had the Revenge of the Sinister Six that you wrote.
And
I don't know why that story still resonates with me. Why that's the way that I actually forever see these characters talking, like the Hulk and Spider-Man. Like how ridiculous the Hulk was, and how I love that book. I love the Revenge of the Sinister Six. So how did that come about? Like, how did it go from, okay, I'm drawing Spider-Man, to let me write it. I'm like Todd McFarlane, except better. I can write the story. How did you sell yourself?
I had done some writing before. I had written a couple of things in Marvel Comics Presents, so I wasn't a completely unknown quantity there. There was. I had a little bit of a track record, and basically Danny Fingeroth needed a warm body. And I was like, he needed a fill-in on the book. So the first thing I did was I had done a story with the Beast in it.
Yep, 15.
And so that was kind of my getting started thing. And I was also at the same time kind of teaching myself to ink. I had not inked before, and I had contacted Terry Cavanaugh in he was an editor on, and he had edited Marvel Comics Presents. He was
Yeah. He went on to write
Namor
books too.
and several other things. And so I basically contacted him and said, I want to learn how to ink. What have you got that needs inking? I'll ink whatever the hell you want me to do. And he sent me a Steve Ditko Human Torch story that was in Marvel Comics Presents.
I still have that. Yes.
And he sent me a Namor annual. And on both of those, I was just like going for it. And if you actually look at the original art from the Namor annual, I started off inking with markers, and by the end of it, I was using the proper inking tools, and I was just really just trying everything out to see how it felt and stuff like that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You probably remember, but I remember there was an issue of X-Force, maybe X-Force 3, that Rob was running late on, and it looked like you had inked.
I inked 3 pages in issue 2 and 2 pages in issue 3.
Cool. So, still got it.
And if there's some big weird sound effects on any of those, I did those too.
Oh, you added those?
I did a lot of my own sound effects really early on when I took over Todd's Spider-Man book. I did some of the sound effects on there. In fact, the first time I worked with Chris Iliopoulos on the Spider-Man, I did all the sound effects that were in that particular issue. I did the title and the sound effects, mostly because I wasn't enamored with the letterer that was lettering all the Spider-Man stuff. So it's like, all right, let me do some of that myself. But when Chris ended up on the book, it was like, all right, we can go back and forth. I can tell him what I want, and he can show me a bunch of things that he's capable of doing. And eventually he was doing everything, and I didn't do a damn any lettering at all. It's like, I'm not a great letterer. I can do sound effects. So let him do it.
So I am loving you on this show because I am known for butchering people's names, and you already have been like pronouncing people's names that I know that I have not pronounced the same way.
And then I was talking to my friend Bill Sienkiewicz, and
I got that one down. I've met him a couple of times. Which one?
Orzechowski? Tom Orzechowski? He's a letterer.
No, I don't have that one down. No. I feel like I need somebody with me at all times.
Who else do you got?
I'll write you a list and you come back on the show. You just whisper in my ear how you pronounce these names.
Right.
So after Spider-Man, you were on Spider-Man up until like I said, the Revenge of the Sinister Six, and then the next thing I knew, because I was a kid, there was no internet back then that was like, rumors are that these 7 guys are leaving Marvel Comics to start their own company. Can you imagine Image if it had been like now, where we have like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all these things?
You'd hear about it, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a much, much different thing at the time. Because at that time, writers and artists really did stick on books for a long, long, long time. So when you had guys who were leaving books, it's like, oh, but that guy was the reason I was reading Spider-Man. And now it's like, if you get an artist to draw 4 consecutive issues of Spider-Man, that's a big deal. Because they're just shuffling creators off and on and back and forth. And they have those books coming out more frequently than monthly, and they can't keep one guy on everything. So I don't know that you could have the 7 top guys stepping off the 7 top books and that you would really even notice it that much. Because it's like, he's just taking a bigger break than usual. Oh, no, I guess he's over there doing something else.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's easier to continue, I guess, reading those books if it's going to be somebody different all the time. Then their name isn't so important anymore, and that's kind of the plan is to not make these artists so indispensable that they can't, that that people can't walk off and that they're still fine. So it's like we're selling the characters now, not selling the creators so much.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it, because I never, as a consumer, you don't think about these things like, oh, I haven't thought of a creative team on a book. Like, I think the latest ones I'm thinking of, like Jason Aaron on Thor, right? And even
But
then,
even
that
on
was 5 years.
how many artists were on there during that time?
Oh, absolutely.
Because there were a lot.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of different artists, and even the guys who were considered the regular artists on there, there would be fill-ins. Other people guesting and doing a little short run here and there, and it's like you don't see that much anymore. There's
No.
almost never an artist who's just sitting on a book for years. And it used to be that it would be years. It would just be like,
it would be a common thing, because I mean, maybe it was my childhood, but when I think of these books, I think of Claremont and Jim Lee. You and David, not Michelini. Michelini. Damn it! I suck. Michelini. Got it. And honestly, the last person I could probably think of that did something like that was the 10-year run that Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley had on Ultimate Spider-Man. That's it.
They did a long run on Ultimate Spider-Man. No.
But maybe that's the secret, right? Maybe that was it. So, but back then, man, it was a huge deal when you all left. And
well, the thing is too, though, that it's hard to sell. Hey, this guy's going to be here a while. It's easier to sell. Hey, there's a new creative team coming on this book, because that becomes a headline. And it's like, hey, look, Mark Bagley's on this book for the 8th consecutive year. Isn't that awesome? It's like, yeah, it is awesome, but you kind of end up taking creators for granted, because it's like, oh, that's just something that's going to be here forever, Whereas the bright shiny new thing is, hey, these creators are shuffling from this book to that book. I'm really excited to be reading Alpha Flight again, because now they've got blah 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 and blah 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 on it. This is going to be great. And that's the headline. Me doing my 254th issue is not a headline.
And I think of collected editions, and Infinite Nexus Reviews brought this up. This is exactly what Marvel is doing with the volumes. New writers, new creative team, new volume, right? So it's like an omnibus comes out, and here's the Bendis Guardians of the Galaxy. Here's, Duggan's Guardians of the Galaxy. Here's DNA's Guardians of the Galaxy, instead of volumes 1, 2, 3, because like you mentioned, those volumes don't sell as well as earlier volumes.
Well, it's also, they can put an issue 1 on it too, because they can do, hey, I'm going to do the Brian Michael Bendis collection of this book, and I can put 1 through 8, and we can do somebody else's Superman collection and put 1 through whatever, and that way you can have all sorts of different jumping on points for all sorts of different people who are like, I just want to read the Jim Lee run on Batman. Well, that's 1 book. Here you go. You can read that. And you can do that with various other people. You can do, whatever creator you can think of. We can do their run on a book. It's the John Byrne Alpha Flights. Here we go. There's 28 issues.
There. I was going to point out there's a Spider-Man book I have that has Erik Larsen's name on it too, on the sponsor.
Yeah, here's that. It's like, hey, here's everything that I did on Spider-Man, and then I go and do a short 10-page story recently, and it's like, oh, now the book doesn't have that. We need to go back to press.
You messed it up forever. It's the legacy things. Yeah, you messed it up for everybody, Erik.
Oh, crap.
All right, so I got to throw this out here because how do you pronounce David Mazzucchelli? Mazzucchelli? You know that one? You got that one, Eric?
I always say Mazzucchelli, but I could be
Mazzucchelli.
completely wrong.
Okay. We tried Infinity.
I don't know. I've never met him, so it's like your guess is as good as mine.
See, that's my go-to answer. I've never met David Michelini. Got it. That's it.
Michelini. There you go.
So you all started Image, walked away from Marvel. A lot of broken hearts, such as me. We're like, wait, what do you mean? These guys are leaving my favorite books. And then I followed.
I didn't have a regular gig at that point anyway, so it was.
How long did it take you? I gotta ask, because how long did it take you to make that jump, like to decide, okay, let's do it? Because it was unheard of at the time. Nobody had done this before you guys.
Yeah, but if you realize that initially all of us, except for Todd, kind of came in and going, well, we'll do a mini series and see how that goes. So it was kind of putting our toes in the water and seeing if it was warm. It wasn't like this whole hog, we're all in, we're all doing it, and whatever. So we kind of were coming in going, well, maybe this will work out. I actually had things that had been approved at both Marvel and DC that were miniseries, and it was like, if this thing goes south, I've got a backup plan. And then it went amazingly well, and then it was like, yeah, I don't need to do that other stuff. Forget it.
It went so well that, did you ever see it going like this? Like where you guys are now?
I think we all had hoped that it would go well. And I think we all had enough faith in ourselves and our own work that we thought this will be awesome. And I think there's always the confidence of youth that comes into play and all this stuff.
I missed that.
You're just young and full of energy, and you think like, I'm the greatest I could ever be. I mean, part of breaking into comics early was just this feeling of, well, I'm fantastic. Why aren't they giving me work? And then, the more you learn, the more you find out, oh, I'm terrible. What the hell? I thought I was awesome. It turns out I'm really, really bad. I hope nobody else catches on. And then slowly but surely you kind of figure this stuff out.
So, and then when you're over at Image, man, it worked. You had a lot of other creators. You set the way, way for a lot of other creator-owned books, and now that's a thing. Now that's huge, right? It's a big.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and it's been fun to see what kind of thing people want to do, and it's always you don't know going into it. Like, okay, well, where does this creator's passion lie? What are the kind of stories that he wants to tell? And it can be really, really different, And when it was the initial group of us, we had all kind of grown up with superheroes, loved superheroes, and wanted to do superhero books. And that was, that was us following our own passion. We weren't sitting there going, oh, I really have this Western I want to tell. It was, this is this kind of stories that I want to do. And then now that Image is around and it's been clear to everybody, oh no, you can do whatever you want, then that just opens up the gate completely. And you have all sorts of people going, well, I want to tell zombie stories, and I want to tell stories of, Chew, for crying out loud. I wouldn't have expected that from anybody. A lot of these books is like, well, where in the world did this come from? And, completely out of left field, but it's like, it's awesome. It's like, the sky is the limit. You don't have to feel like you need to conform to any one universe. You can do your own world, you know, your own world building, and do whatever the hell you want to do within the confines of that book. And that's great. At the same time, I do miss having there be a shared
Ah,
superhero universe. And it's like, come
one
on,
of
man,
one
I want some
one of
other
the
toys to play with here.
one of the last things one of the last things I got before I left comic books for a while was when you all did the image swap month. Like
Hmm.
you went on over to another comic. Somebody drew. Was it? I think. No.
I swapped with Jim Lee. So he did an issue of Savage Dragon. I did an issue of Wildcats. And then Todd and Mark swapped
Yep.
with Cyberforce and Spawn. And then Valentino and Liefeld
I felt.
swapped. So
That was so fun. And then, yeah, you're right. It was everything. Like Spawn's background had something to do with this guy in Youngblood. There was that same scene that I love so much in Savage Dragon and Spawn 4, I think, when Spawn's in a trench coat and they're like, oh, look, it's that new hero.
No, it was cool just to be able to acknowledge that, hey, there's these other things which exist in this world. And it's like, wow, this is cool. And we can do this stuff. And I do miss that to a degree, but you know, there's always guys who are sitting there going, oh, I want to do this again. I want to do that again. So it's like, all right, we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
I was excited for that image thing that Robert Kirkman was writing. And
I kind of felt
yeah, no, I didn't want to bring up bad memories again. But I remember 2 years ago asking you where you guys were, and you were like, I did my part.
Yeah, it's something of a logistical nightmare. Pages were, I think FedEx was the real winner in that one. You know, because pages were being sent all over the place, and it would be like, oh, this needs a background, send that to this guy. And this needs some foreground figures, send it here, and all the pages that the plot we'd print out the plot and tape it on the back of the page so people could go like, oh, okay, I guess I got to draw a guy in panel 3. And so one guy would do the layouts. Rob Liefeld laid out issue 1, except for the last page, there was one page that was just dragon characters. So it's like, I don't need you guys. I don't need you for that. So I just did that on my own. And then I laid out issues 2 through 5. 6 was never plotted, so I never got to jump ahead to that. But yeah, issues 4 and 5 there are pages that are done. the book never got finished, but there are pages that are sitting there like, hey, here's this cool page with Savage Dragon and Violator running around, and Todd inked all the Violator stuff, and wouldn't that be cool to see someday? But at this point, Rob somehow doesn't own Youngblood anymore, or Supreme, so then that becomes a problem. And then, you know, people just get involved doing other stuff. You know, Mark's off doing a project elsewhere, and it's just the way of the world. You know?
And here you are, still with the dragon, almost 250 issues. What issue are you working on right now?
I am working on issue 251 right now.
So, okay.
So it's good to have 250 in the rearview mirror and on to the next.
On to the next one?
On to the next one, yeah.
Do you still keep your comic pages right beside you as you're drawing them? Like,
I've got, yeah.
You got a cover for 250?
What?
I said, do you have a cover for 250?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know where the hell it is. It's around here somewhere. It's back there somewhere.
It's back there. Okay.
I don't know where everything is. I got I started working twice up, so I got a stack of pages that are super big back there. So it's in that. I know that, but I'd have to go digging for it.
It's okay. I was just randomly asking. So you mentioned something that brings up my big question because I'm a big I'm big in the collected editions,
Hmm.
and I've talked to you about this before, but now we're gonna have a serious conversation,
Yeah,
Eric.
yeah. Serious work.
So one of the things that you mentioned about Rob losing the rights to Youngblood, losing the rights to characters like Supreme, really affects a lot of these things. Like you mentioned at one point, there was a shared universe. So
Yeah.
when, like for example, I'll use the one of the biggest things. I did a video a couple of weeks ago with my Spawn hardcovers, and they
Hmm.
stopped at number 10, right? And everybody's like, "Man, where can I find these?" And a lot of them are out of print, so much so that it's insane the amount of money they go for. And one of the things I brought up was I'm not 100% sure if they were to collect these this way again, they could even do it because now the
Yeah, yeah,
character.
we can. We can.
Okay.
That's all right. That's all. That stuff is all. That's all grandfathered in on all this stuff. I don't even ask. It's like I would assume that whoever owns Youngblood now, if Savage Dragon is in any of those pages, that they can reprint that as much as they want. You know, they can't do new pages with Savage Dragon on them, but if there's pre-existing material that has my characters in it,
Mhm.
and they own, you know, Bad Rock or whatever, it's like, yeah, you can reprint those things forever. And if and you know, it's just like those old agreements. They still stand. You know, I don't the owners of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have that's changed hands over the years,
Yeah.
but you know the turtles appeared in Savage Dragon #2 and a #22. So you know when I go to reprint those issues, I don't contact Nickelodeon and I'll ask for their permission. It's just kind of assumed that they're part of my landscape, and if they want to reprint their ends of stuff, they are certainly welcome to do so. In
That
fact,
is really
right now,
interesting.
IDW is
Yeah.
reprinting the turtle stuff that I
Yeah. The unfinished image
totally
stuff.
saw.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was about to bring that up. IDW for some reason always never has issues with these things. They just like well, I don't want to say never. They went through some Transformer phases where they had to leave out characters from Marvel. And then eventually I think they got Marvel's permission to just go ahead and run with it.
it, it can be a nightmare, and that's why you end up with books that kind of don't have owners in some weird way. You know, it's like
Mhm.
Marvel licensed Godzilla, but then there's all of their Marvel characters are throughout that 24 issue
Yeah.
Godzilla run, you know? So it's like if somebody else is reprinting Godzilla, can they reprint Godzilla that has Spider-Man swinging by and fights Devil Dinosaur and the Fantastic Four? It's like probably the only people who are ever going to be able to collect that is going to be Marvel. And if they don't care and they don't want to fight that battle, um, that's the end of that. You know, ROM Space Knight is the same deal. You've got Marvel characters throughout there, and you know, Micronauts and all that other stuff. It just becomes this nightmare.
Oh man, yeah, because they were licensed to toys
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. Well, I mean, Micronauts were toys, so they're
yeah,
licensed the toys. So whoever owns the toys owns Micronauts.
and I think now it falls on IDW. It's kind of a weird thing too. So I guess the question is like with we've gotten the entire collection of The Walking Dead. I'm looking at my shelf, right, in hardcover format. You know where I'm
Uh-huh.
going with this. There's several titles that I'm a huge fan of that
But do
get
you have?
hard.
Is there a complete Spawn?
No,
It's just like that's 300 issues. You
that's
know.
300 issues. And we made it to volume 10 of the hardcovers. and then it kind of stopped.
Collects you up through what, issue 120?
120, I think, something like that. Yeah, and they're wonderful. They're well made. People love. Like when I showcased them, like people kept asking me, "Where can I find these?" And I'd be like, "Well, I will say that some of them are available, and the ones that are not are almost near impossible to find." And one of the things I was trying to do was like, I need to get a hold of somebody. I even tweeted Todd. I'm like, Todd, we got to make this happen. People are interested in this character, and
Well, it's really tough to get the books that people want into their hands. I mean, it really just can be super problematic because retailers are sitting there going, that's a huge gamble for us to just as a shot in the dark buy $100 book. You know, if nobody comes in to buy this $100 book in my store, that's a huge financial commitment on my part.
mhm.
And I don't want to be stuck with $100 book. So I'm not going to order this $100 book because I can't bet on that particular fan walking in to my store. And some places have people sign up for stuff and they go through those catalogs and make a list of everything that they're committed to doing.
Yeah,
I know some retailers want to get paid up front from a lot of things to know, look, I get that you say you're going to buy the next, Saga collection, but I want to be sure that you're going to buy that next Saga collection because that's a lot of money for me as a small shop owner someplace. And the thing with a book like Savage Dragon is you go, that's a lot of issues. That's just a ton of books.
it absolutely is.
If you're collecting hardcovers and you've got 10 issues in every hardcover, which I mean, at a certain point, a certain number of books, and you're going, this thing is too unwieldy to read. It's just too big to read. But even if you're going, there's going to be 12 of these in every issue. It's like, okay, well, I'm on issue 251 now.
Yeah.
And there was miniseries to start this thing. So you're looking at more than 20 volumes of a book. And it's like, I can count on there being enough orders for issue volume 1 and for volume 2 and maybe volume 3. But by the time we're getting to volume, 7, 8, 9, those numbers aren't going to be there. And it's like, I would love to have the entire series all available in these nice hardcover books, but it just becomes cost prohibitive to do that.
So, this is. I swear this is not a pitch. It's just me genuinely coming from the heart to you, because the way that I see things are. Yes, you are 100% right. There is a gamble to printing a book that, like you said, $100 if you're going to put 30 issues in it or 40 issues, however many issues you want, and making a volume 1, it may sell great. People might back out of it. Let's make a volume 2. But I think of books that these books mean something to people, right?
Oh,
There's a Fantagraphics line of the Don Rosa collection of Scrooge and Donald Duck. There's a Fantagraphics line of the Carl Barks collection. And I look at my bookshelf, I see, the complete line of creepy and eerie magazines in art. And when they start this, they're all like, man, that was Dark Horse, that was Fantagraphics. And when they start this, they're like, these are going to be released twice a year, meaning that it's going to be 10 years before we finish this out. Right. So as the consumer, I'm like, yes, I'm going to get it all in my shelf. Right. There's a couple of questions that I have. And one of them is, I've interviewed some creators at Image where they said that it's up to them personally to this, like Isola, for example. I talked to those guys, Carl Kressel, and they were like, I was like, dude, this art is beautiful. The hardcover would sell. And I sound like a car salesman. I swear I'm not. But and they were like, yeah, honestly, it's up to us. Like, as the creators, we tell Image, and I think somebody else told me that too. Like, is it up to the creators or is it up to Image? Because it's different, right? It's not Marvel, it's not DC. These characters, at Marvel and DC, somebody at Marvel or DC goes, "Hey, let's make an omnibus of Superman. Let's make an omnibus of Spider-Man." Whereas in Image, how does that work?
Well, it is both, because there's the publisher does have a say, and there's certainly creators who are sitting there going, I did a limited series and I want to put that out as a trade, and there are times where Image goes, yeah, but that limited series didn't sell very well, and we don't think a trade is going to be successful on that book. So, it is an investment on our part too. We're paying that printing bill,
Mm-hmm.
and we recoup the money maybe eventually, but it's not that easy.
No, and I think that's something that I wanted to.
And at a certain point, you add up all those numbers and go, so you guys have got 40 different hardcover books, and you're in the red for all of those. That's carrying a lot of debt in some cases. And that can be the case if we're doing Savage Dragon stuff, where you go, oh, that sounds awesome, until you actually have to do it, and then it's not so awesome anymore, where suddenly you're sitting there going, I've got 20 books. I'm in the red on 20 books. We've got all these volumes. Now we're paying for storage on all these books. And, you've got a certain amount of fans who are saying, yes, I would buy those. And a certain amount of retailers are going, maybe. But it's really tough when you suddenly have to deal with, that much inventory, and then, paying for storage fees, and then paying for print runs, and yes, things mean a lot to everybody, and it's great, but it's really complicated.
So, one of the things I've seen people do, because it is creator owned, is take it to like Kickstarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get people interested, get people talking, and meet that Kickstarter goal of like, oh crap. I mean, look at Todd's figure that he was like, there's no way this is gonna cross, and that's one action figure, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, this is the amount, and it's insane what nostalgia and people that grew up in that era,
I mean, that's what it may come to. That it may come to us just going, okay, this is the way this is gonna be, and it's got to be, in order to make these things work. I don't want to be the guy who's sitting there making those stupid commercials. So I just don't want to do it.
You just come on YouTube channels and be like, okay, look, this is what we're gonna do. We got a box set of Savage Dragon coming out, 1 through 250, limited edition.
Books, and they're going to be 25 issues per book, and we're going to do. I mean, at this point, if we did books that were 25 issues, it's like that's 10 books. That's a lot of books, and those are unwieldy books. You start putting in that many pages, it's like that's a tough read. And those big omnibuses that come out through Marvel and DC, it's like these things are super cool and they look great on the shelf, but man, there's not a lot of times that I'm sitting there going, I gotta sit down and read this thing, because it's just too unwieldy.
I'm reading one right now. I love reading those things. I like the bigger the better, Eric.
Yeah,
I am that guy.
You take that thing into the throne room and just watch your legs go numb.
I don't. Yes, that has happened. There was this one book, Colossal Conan.
You're cutting off my circulation here.
Well, you mentioned getting older. I could just text my wife one day, okay, you're not allowed to tell anybody, but I'm stuck in the bathroom with Colossal Conan because my legs gave out on me.
That's true. I'm pinned to the toilet. So no.
but anyway, just it's just something that I have been asked a lot and on my channel. And I never really, because I don't have an answer for people like that are like, hey, why doesn't Image reprint this? Because I know that it's a lot easier than let's reprint that book, right? Because there's always numbers involved.
Sometimes too is the landscape was so different when we started than it is now. At that point, digital files were comparatively huge, and that when the colorist was coloring things, they would have these discs, and you can put 2 pages on a disc, and you would have to send out like 10 or 12 discs for every comic book that you were publishing, and then all of the discs were expensive, and so people would color these things, and then they would get the disc back, and they'd clean off the disc and put the next bunch of issues on to send stuff out because they didn't want to have to buy a huge pile of discs. And then there was storage issues with the discs, and other publishers in other countries were having us send stuff over to them. So with a lot of the early stuff, the problem is we don't have those files anymore, and it would be super expensive to recolor it, and scanning in the comics and cleaning them up is also going to be time consuming, expensive, and won't look that good. So it just compounds it. It's like, holy crap, there's all these things that are now part of the equation that I didn't realize were part of the equation. And and that's tough. So it's not as easy as just pressing the print button, because it becomes, how many of these issues do we need to either get recolored, which won't match the original regardless. It's just not. You can't do it. It's not the same as early Marvel DC, where you can just look at the color and go, oh, it's Caucasian flesh, that's 25% magenta, 25% yellow. Oh, it's Spider-Man's costume, that's going to be, and you can just plug in those numbers. These, it's like there's all these gradations, there's all this modeling, there's color holds. Does anybody even have the original art anymore in black and white so that can be scanned in?
That would be you, Eric.
a real ordeal to just be able to do this stuff. It's not always that simple.
No, and I wanted to get that point across to people watching. Like, why don't they just reprint? Because it's not. You're absolutely 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm doing these Savage Dragon archive books, which are all in black and white.
Yeah.
And at this point, I've got color for all the later stuff, and I could just be going, all right, well, later issues of archives will just be in color from this point on, and then we'll.
Yeah, there you go. And you make them hardcover instead of softcover. Then you got a whole new market.
There are complications that go on. You can't just go, I'm going to take the stuff which is softcover and make it hardcover. It's not that simple. And the reason it's not that simple is because the binding of the different kinds of books are different. One is glue bound and one is sewn. And so what happens with the sewn books is it doesn't eat up as much stuff on the spine as the softcover stuff does. So that means everything else needs to be kind of re-put together and recomposed, and you can't just swap in one for the other.
I was just trying to find an easy route for you to Changing them in hardcover.
It's such a mess. We've done it before. You know, we've done like we got a soft cover of this, and then there's going to be a hardcover version of that, and it's just was like, oh, I thought that we could just print the guts for both and just bind it different, and everything would be wonderful. Turns out it doesn't work that way.
There's an actual science behind all that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's, all your double page spreads either have a huge gap in the middle or a big chunk of them are being eaten up in the center. And it's like, oh, God, this is a nightmare, and you don't think about that when you're composing your pages for a comic book.
Single issue. Yeah.
That, hey, these are going to be in a different format one day. Just like when these comics were initially colored back in the day, the colorists at that point weren't able to color double page spreads as a double page spread. They had to color the left-hand side, and then they colored the right-hand side. And when those two pages were printed next to each other in a comic book, your eye just kind of fudged the gap between those two, and you didn't really notice that, hey, the gradation in the sky on one side and the color on the other, they don't exactly match up perfectly. But once it's in digital form and you're looking at it in that form, it's like, God, these don't match up at all. What the hell's going on here? Suddenly it's a spread, and it is one piece, and there is no seam, and it just is ugly. It's so, some of just depending on how you like to get your comics delivered to you, can really vary on what this stuff looks like. And it can just, hey, this works well in this format. It doesn't work so well in that format. Some of this stuff is like, hey, it looks great in print, not so great in digital form.
Yeah. People
sitting there trying to read comics on their phones going, how come this double page spread looks like crap? And that's like, well, you're the guy who decided he wanted to watch Titanic on his phone, and guess what? It's not so impressive.
All right, so here's an idea for you from BBC All-Star. All they have to do is put that cover to 225, the XXX cover, as the promotion for supporting a Kickstarter. Even fans of Savage Dragon who don't know what the series is will support it. You got a lot of fans of this stuff, man. It's great. Like that there is a demand for things like that, and
yeah. No, it's awesome that this stuff exists, and that there are people who are super enthusiastic about it. That's the thing that's kept me going all these years. Is just the support of people who are super into it. And that's great. Are those people gonna buy a huge amount of hardcover books? Like, God, I hope they would.
You're damn right they will, Eric. I'm serious.
You're right if they would, but
they will.
Is the mechanism we have for selling comics at this point, is that going to work with what we got going on here? We've got stores. I'm sure there are many stores that are going to be closed following this pandemic. Oh. It's like not a lot of stores can sit there and go, hey, we can afford to be closed for 2 months and be just fine, or 3 months. Who knows what this is going to be? I mean, today, new comics are out.
Yeah, I saw that.
But where I live, those aren't essential businesses, so those stores aren't open.
Yeah.
So what is a store like that supposed to do? Because if you're a reader and you regularly come into that store and you regularly get Savage Dragon and the new issue is out, does that store order Savage Dragon with the hope that a month from now, when stores are are able to open, that they're still going to have that copy? Or is that fan going to go, I'm going to have to hunt all over the internet and I'm going to get that copy off of eBay and I'm going to pay a couple bucks more than I would if I got it from my local store, but I really need to get my fix now. I really need to have that. And then that store, when it opens up, going, we bought this for you, and now you've got a copy already. What are we supposed to do with this? So it's madness. I mean, some people are going to wait. Some people aren't going to wait. I think in some ways it's kind of soon for people to be sending comics out to shops, especially when the major, the major metropolitan centers that are getting comics are the areas that are most hit by the virus, because that's where all the people are.
Yeah.
You know?
I thought about that. I have a Saturday live show where I'll talk about these things. I've had a couple of comic book stores on my channel, like, talking about how they've endured, and it's a weird time. That's for sure.
It's
And
definitely a weird time. You know, I mean, if you're sitting there going, I'm renting this store, but I can't open my store, whose fault is that? I mean, is the landlord going to be like, yeah, well, you're not allowed to open your store, so you don't have to pay rent? That seems like that would be a super cool thing for a landlord to do. At the same time, the landlord's sitting there going, yeah, but I still have a mortgage. I still have my bills that I have to pay. I still have taxes that I'm paying. I still got this other stuff. My bills don't stop just because you're not making money. On the other hand, it's like, if I kick you out, I can't put somebody else in there because they're not going to be able to be open. So, you know, you've been a good tenant for the last 15 years. I'm going to let this slide. Or I don't even know how this is going to work. You know, and then stores have got employees and plenty of them, and you know, you're furloughing those people, and some of them are getting, it's like, holy crap.
it's a rough time. Like, because most of them get new comics just to keep the to keep the lights on. New comics keeps the lights on, and then everything else, it helps pay for the employees and things like that. And there's no new comics.
And you got some stores that do super well on trades, and some stores that are really dependent on that monthly comic book reader who's just coming in there getting those monthly comic books. So and it's really interesting how in just different areas of town, some stores are just really focused on one thing, and some stores are focused on something else. You know, Brian Hibb he's got 2 different stores in San Francisco, and you know, one of those stores, they blow out tons of trades, and one of them, they've been trying to transition to that, but the people who go there, they want their monthly comics, and they're all about monthly comics at that other location. And there's stores that sell tons and tons and tons of back issues, and there are many stores in town that don't have any back issues at all. They just don't. It's like, these are the new comics that are on the shelf. These are all the comic books that have come out the last couple of months that are still on the shelf, still available for cover price. Nothing in their store has a price on it that's higher than cover price. You know, and that's the way that some of these places run.
Yeah.
So it's all over the map.
And it must have been a really difficult decision, like, because we're waiting for somebody to make decisions, right? Like, that's what happens when this started. Then the distribution center, the biggest, the only, what a lot of people thought, the biggest distribution center in America, decided, no, we got to keep our employees safe. We're locking down. That's it.
Yeah, well,
so then
the printer closed.
Oh yeah.
And now the printer that we've been printing our comic books at for years is dead. They're closed, like they're gone closed. So we're getting a new printer to print our comics now. So we got to transition to an entirely different location, and then suddenly it's like there is a reason that Diamond wasn't distributing comics, because the printer was closed. The printer had people, they were going, yeah, we can't have people here. So we're closing up, and then they ended up closing, period. And then,
Damn.
So
was that out of the States?
Dragon 248 was printed and was supposed to be in stores April 1st or 2nd, whatever that first Wednesday was.
Mm-hmm.
And their cutoff was the week before. That's when they stopped distributing comics. So they had shut their doors. So those comics that are in stores today, those are the comics that have been kicking around or on, I don't know, somebody's dock somewhere for quite a while, month and a half.
So Erik, the printer, I didn't know that. The printer that Image used to print like single issues and trade paperbacks, they closed for good. This is, I assume, out of the country? Like, are you talking about?
This is in Canada. I think our new printer is in the U.S. Okay. I don't remember what state there are. I know that it's not all one printer. There'll be, a lot of stuff gets shopped around. We want to do a special hardcover, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, all right, well, these are coming from China, or these are going to come from this place or that. So it is all over the place, but I think the place where it's our regular comics, I want to say it's the place where we get our regular comics, is closed for good. And I believe they did books for a lot of other people too. So
yeah. That's sad. I remember that was the first inclination that something was going to happen. Like here was, because there's always a domino effect. Was the printers closing out of the country, and that affected book printings and things like that.
Yeah, well, a lot of stuff happens like that. You've got tons. I don't know if it's going to be a huge amount of stores going to end up closing, but I know certainly that some have already are closed and are gone. So then you've got, books that have marginal sales to begin with are suddenly going, all right, but now we've lost 20% of our audience. Are those readers going to be like, I got to find some different source to get my comics? Or are those readers going, all right, well, I've wanted to transition into getting my books digital, or I want to just be buying trades from this point, or I'll try and do mail order, or what? Or maybe this is time to put away my childish things and move on with my life, and whatever.
Let's not call them that.
There are girls out there. What the hell?
Hey, girls love comic books, Erik. It's a new age, man. So let's shift the conversation to a little thing, something more positive. Like, there's God, I hate talking about this because it's so depressing, man. Like, I know
it's the biggest problem is so much of it is completely unknown. We're still in the middle of this. Stores are still closed. We don't know what's going to happen. Diamond is sitting there going, we want to get back in business and open up America again. Blah, blah, blah.
I tell you, one of the biggest problems that I have, and I don't mind expressing this on the channel, I feel like one of the companies decided to jump the gun and started making decisions without thinking about the repercussions of what was going to happen. They're like, okay, well, we'll just use another distribution center. We'll find our own way. What?
Yeah, no. It doesn't. There are a lot of problems. And there are a lot of problems with a lot of aspects to the way the business is run, the way comics are created. I mean, I have these conversations with people all day long about making each one of these ways that we are giving comics to people or selling comics to people. It's like if I'm making something that is being sold as an individual saddle stitch comic book, that thing should be at least comprehensible, at least a satisfying read to some extent. Can we have that? And there are comics where they aren't. It's the middle of a fight, and characters are essentially in the same place at the end as they were at the beginning. And while that may be an awesome chapter in a trade, it might not be a great chapter as just a single comic book. Someday this one comic book isolated is going to be sold to some kid at a garage sale, and that's going to be their gateway drug. And if they're
That's all it takes.
reading, if they're reading this one isolated comic book that they saw in the barber shop or at a garage sale, or dad bought and brought home for them, are they going to be like, man, comics are awesome? Or are they going to be, I'm lost. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know who these characters are. I don't know what the situation is. Nobody's being introduced to me. I have no idea. And that's an issue. That's a serious issue.
So during a normal time, Image has opened up a way for new creators to come and publish their book through Image Comics, right?
Absolutely.
I know there's several creators in the chat right now, whether they're writers or artists. How does that process even begin? Instead of because before it would be like, well, you for example, just going to a convention, be like, look at my stuff, I'm an artist, hire me. Great, right?
No, it's even easier now though. It's so much easier because it's like now we have Facebook, and people will get on Twitter and just will respond to a thread and just be like, hey, well, hire me. Here's 4 pages, to show you what I'm capable of in a Twitter response. And you can look at it and go, hey, this guy's pretty good. You can look at it and go, I'm not responding to this guy. He's terrible.
It's so much easier to do it than face to face.
It's in front of somebody's face. People are doing fan art and putting it up on DeviantArt, or people are doing fan art and they're putting it in responses on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram. And you see this stuff everywhere. When I was trying to break in, I would physically be sitting there making copies and mailing things to people. When I was trying to break in at DC, I didn't even have common sense enough to send them photocopies. I sent them original art and be like, hey, here's a 22-page story. How about this? And it's like, I didn't even hear back. And I certainly wasn't sent back the originals. And it's like, all right, so that happened. Cool.
So so that's an artist, right? An artist can be like, here's my stuff. Look at what I can do. As a writer, what do you suggest they do? Like as a writer, somebody's has a pitch for a story or has their first story arc written out and be like, I just need somebody to publish this. I'd love to be at Image.
Well, if people are sitting there going, I want to do my stuff through Image, really, we publish books. So essentially what you'd have to do is you'd have to find an artist and be like, I am pitching my book. Here is my written synopsis of where I'm seeing this thing going. Here are 5 sample pages of artwork. These are what the characters are going to look like. This is the story we want to tell here. And that's their sales pitch. It's 5 pages minimum, I think. Okay. I think maybe a cover to show, just to show people that, hey, we know what we're doing. we have a clue as to how this works. We know what comic books look like, that sort of thing.
We know what comics look like, right?
Or
Or how
some
sequential art works.
people don't. They will just like. I mean, we get samples from people that are drawn on lined paper and they're square. You know, it's like it's all crayon. You do everything crayon and colored pencil and ballpoint pen, right?
Eric, you don't have to call me out on the air.
No, that's that's not how it works necessarily.
You didn't have to call me out on the air, man. That was my submission.
What was that?
So that was my submission. You didn't have to call me out all in there.
We would get stuff like that, and then we get people who are just like, well, here's my idea for a book, and it's like a list of names. It's like, well, that's awesome that you know how to make a list. That's cool.
So you said we. Do you yourself do you oversee these things? Like somebody's like, hey, or is it like
I'm a publisher? I did. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's we, the collective Image Comics. We at this point, Eric Stevenson is going to be looking through everything, and I think there's probably a filter in that process where there is somebody else who's opening up mail as it comes in and just going, whoa, that's so good, or whatever. And it varies, but we've hired a few people through the mail that were just cold submissions. They just,
that's really cool. That's really cool.
The Luna brothers were just sent their stuff through the mail, and it just came. Hickman's first book was like that. He just did the nightly news that he just sent that in cold. There was no, and that was a weird ass looking book too. It was, him drawing his own stuff, and it was super stylized and weird, and there was typography everywhere, and it was like, well,
I've got that hardcover.
It's a cool looking book, and it's a cool thing. It's like, yeah, we want to do that. And the thing is, there are so many different ways of doing comics that, if you're a guy who just wants to write comics, can't draw for shit, there are ways of doing that still, where you can just go, you know what, I may not be able to find a great artist, but I can find some great clip art, and I can assemble those in a way that there's a sequence, and I can put some word balloons in here, and I can tell a story, or I can tell my story with Stickman. And, if somebody is reading this online and they go, oh, have you read this thing? It's awesome. And it may look terrible, but it's a start, and really what it takes is for somebody to go, I read this, it's great, you got to check this out. And you've got strips that are drawn terribly, that are really, really well written or hilarious, and you can get some traction just that way. And then it's just, okay, now that people know that I can write, maybe I can find an artist who is willing to work with me, and a lot of guys who ended up being successful writers started off being terrible cartoonists who, who just, I'm going to write and draw, and I'm really incapable of doing that, Like Alan Moore drew some comics.
Yeah.
And they're terrible. He is, but it also, it helped him a great deal in terms of figuring out, well, what can be drawn, what can't be drawn, what are things that are people are capable of doing. And it's good as a writer to have something of a sense for what's possible, so that you don't say to an artist, he shakes his head. And the artist is sitting there going, okay, my choice is I can draw this or I can draw this, but I can't do a drawing that's this. I've got to make a decision. What am I drawing here when he says he shakes his head? You know, and you get a lot of writers who are coming out of doing, I'm used to writing prose. I'm
Yeah.
used to being able to say, she walks in the room, goes to the window, stares out, sees something across, you know, and it's like panel 2, you know, it's like, no, that's too much stuff happening in one panel. We can't have that. Walk in the bathroom, pick up a hairbrush and brush her hair and have an idea and walk back out into the other room in one panel. That can't be done. You know?
And that's a lot of useful information that you're letting on, because a lot of people don't think about these things, like, or a lot of people are,
when they're making comics, they don't think, hey, I'm turning a page and I'm seeing both pages at once. I'm seeing all that information is being spilled out in front of me as I turn that page. And if the Red Skull is a surprise villain and he's in panel 3 of a right-hand page, my eye is going to go, whoa, Red Skull, he's right over here. Look at that bright red thing. Red Skull's going to show up. And I'm skipped over this whole page and this whole number of panels here because my eye was attracted to the shiny thing over here. Red Skull's showing up. Okay, now I got to go back and read this stuff to see when he shows up. But that was already spoiled for me as a reader, because my eye sees everything in that 2-page spread. You know? So then you start having to think, as a creator, how do I control the reader's eye? And then you get like, oh, cliffhangers are on right-hand pages, last panel. Oh, reveals are left-hand pages, first panel. Oh, okay. I can write to that now. And that becomes this pattern in terms of writing. But that's not something that you're necessarily born with when you're coming to write comic books. You know, when you're writing TV shows, you're sitting there going, oh, I've got this 8-minute block of time, and then I'm building towards a commercial. That's a really different way of writing than writing for a movie where there is no commercial break, you know? And, you know, and when you're sitting there going, I've got set pieces and I can only work within these sets. I'm actually having to write to, you know, Jerry Seinfeld's apartment, and, you know, and we never see the other characters' places at all. You know, we've got Monks, we've got the apartment, we've, you know, in the last season we've built them a street scene, but prior to that we didn't even have a street that we could deal with, you know, and you know, so writing comics has its own huge numbers of things that you don't think about until you do them, and then you know, and I've had issues where it's like, we're going to take these comics and now we're going to make cartoons out of these, and you go, hey, you know, this character Ricochet in the comics works. In a cartoon, she doesn't work, because you would have her talking as she's jumping from one place to another. And you can do that in a comic book.
That's right.
You can't do that in a cartoon, because that character was there and now they're over there, and she can't be saying that much stuff as she's going from here to there. That's just one of these, you know, she's got to stop to talk, because, you know, otherwise you just have these voices that are just running by you midair. And it's like, oh, there are these things that we can do here that you can't do there, and vice versa. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? You know, what are these things we can do that can't be done in anywhere else? We can do an off-panel voice in a comic book.
Yeah.
And you don't know who's speaking until you turn that page.
That
unless you're going with crazy fonts and crazy word balloons. But in a movie, if you hear a voice and then you turn to see who it is, you hear that voice, and that voice tells you who's talking. In a comic book, we can hear a voice and have no idea if that's a man or a woman or a child or anything else until you turn that page. And that's kind of a cool thing that we have in our toolbox that we don't have elsewhere. You can do inner monologues. You can have there be thought balloons, and we can have characters saying one thing and going, I hope they're buying this, and knowing that they're lying in the.
Eric? I think you froze for a little bit.
Me just Doctor Strange stuff. I like the side.
Dude, this is seriously, information like this makes you appreciate this medium, right? Because this is why I love comics, because to me there are some stories.
Just let me butt in here while I think of it. One of the frustrations of suddenly going, hey, we're going to be back and doing stuff at Marvel again or DC again, is suddenly them going, oh, we're doing a trade and we're going to shuffle the pages. So all of your right-hand cliffhangers are now on the left-hand side, and all of your reveals are on the right side. And we have just spoiled.
There are fixes. There are ways around that.
And it's like the creator is there going, God, And so my workaround when I'm back doing Marvel stuff again is, all right, page 2, 3, double page spread, because it's like I'm setting the pace. This is my left hand. This is my right. This is the way it's going to be. And even then, they'll be like, oh, we're going to throw a title page in here, or we're going to just do a random ad so that suddenly everything's.
I will tell you, that's why people like Jonathan Hickman oversee their collected editions. So whenever a trade paperback of Fantastic Four or Avengers, whatever he's worked on, he's like, no, or East of West, put all the covers in the back. This is the way that it's supposed to be read. Yeah. I don't care about chapter breaks. The audience knows what they're getting into.
Well, so I would do for a while there is I wouldn't have there be title pages. I wouldn't have there be credits pages, as in the story, in the confines of the story, and I would intentionally have it so that the last page of this issue leads right into the next page of the next issue. So in some of my trades, you don't know where one issue stops and another one starts, because it's just a continuous stream of stuff. There's no breaks there. There's no way to tell where one issue stops and one starts, because there's no, next issue blurb or no titles
covers and things. Yeah,
that's in the middle of there. In one instance, I ended an issue with a full page spread, and I began the next issue with a full page spread. And in the trade paperback, we saw that was a double page spread. But you didn't know that when they were as individual splashes. That was a reveal when it was a trade. But suddenly it's like, oh, those two pages actually fit together. And that was the spread. And we didn't know that. And it's like, all right, yeah, that's something we can do.
And you start learning, right? You start learning as you go on when these things happen. Yeah. Little shortcuts.
Oh, this works. This doesn't work. And it can be complicated as to, okay, well, why does this work? Why doesn't this work? And I've tried a ton of different things over the years of, okay, let's try formatting a story this way. Try formatting a story that way. I did an issue where every panel took place on a different day. Okay? So it's page 1, you have a splash, and it's like characters at a funeral. Page 2, the first panel is, and then it's like, okay, well, how am I going to do this so that it becomes really clear to the reader that everything is a different day? And it's like, all right, so characters are going to have different shirts. They're going to be in different locations all the time, and so that you have this constant like, I've got to have something in the background that really tells people he's in a diner now. Now he's at home. Now he's outside. Now we're at a playground. And so it's really obvious that something's different. Hey, it's raining now. Hey, now it's not raining. Now but I had gotten the book was in a place where I would do a couple issues where one had continued right into the other and one into the other. And so I got to this point where I'm like, I'm 3 months behind where I need to be in terms of keeping this as real time. Mm-hmm. So I want to do an issue where I'm just, every issue is a different day. And every page is a different day. Every panel is a different day. How can we do this so that it becomes this? And it was a pretty entertaining issue because it's so
cool idea. You could have done the Hollywood thing and just put a calendar in the back. Calendar. Cheat. It's okay to cheat a little bit, you know. It's okay. So I haven't been interacting with the chat much because I've been having a lot of fun just sitting and talking to you. But people have been asking this. Is there ever a time that you see yourself going back to doing characters like Spider-Man, like maybe like with Donny Cates working on Spider-Man, Venom, doing drawing Venom?
First, the chance of me working with another writer at this point is 0. Mm-hmm. It's just, I just don't want to do it. It's so much easier, so much more fun just to do it all myself. And I'm just not that guy anymore. So I've done that, and it was I had a good time doing it, but I don't want to do that anymore. And then in terms of going back and doing stuff at any company, maybe if something super excites me and I feel like I want to do something with this, but I'm not sitting there actively pitching anything or trying to make anything happen. I mean, occasionally somebody will ask if I want to do this or that, and that happens.
So Freddie, my boy Freddie, has a question. It's been fun watching you talk, but what about working with a different artist as you being the storyteller?
I've done that. I've done that numerous times. A lot of times, backup stories, I'll scratch that itch and do that all. I've done that quite a bit, actually, working with a lot of different artists over the years. You know, I did that on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's fun, and it can be challenging, and there ends up being, a lot of stuff that you just suddenly are having to face, where it's like, oh wow, I was not envisioning that at all, or you nailed it, exactly what I was thinking. But more often it was, what the hell?
So here's a good question. Image. Hold on just a second. Where was it? Oh, from Del Boy. Do you have a hero or villain you loathe to draw? I remember reading Romita Sr. saying he got the sweats drawing Doc Ock because of the tentacles. Was there a character that you were ever like, man, I hate drawing this character?
I didn't like drawing Venom in pencil form, but when I do like sketches of him at conventions now, he's a lot of fun because I like drawing him in ink because he's got so much black on him that in pencil it's just like, you know, you're either putting X's down for where those black areas are and not really getting a sense of what it's going to look like, or you're painstakingly filling in the blacks and it's just really time consuming. When you're sitting there working with ink, you can just grab a brush or some thick marker or something and just go bam, bam, and put in those cool black shapes. And it's kind of a fun character to draw that way. Other than that, usually in Savage Dragon, if a character is too much of a pain in the ass to draw, I just kill him. But you can tell who I don't like is just like, all right, the guy's out of here. There's a bit of that, and trying to think. I really try to find the fun in whatever it is I'm doing. I've always said that if you're not working on your favorite comic book, you're doing it wrong. And I think really that's the thing, is to find the part of it that is entertaining to you and fun, you know. And so that's been my struggle, such as it is. So
So here's a question: what's more difficult for you, penciling or inking?
penciling. Penciling is definitely more difficult. I mean, inking is it's kind of where the fun is, where you can kind of are able to play around with stuff. But in terms of figuring out where all the pieces go and how everything lines up, penciling is somewhat more difficult.
So they're asking of the rating. What is the rating on Savage Dragon these days?
Like it is mature.
So it is mature. We've gone above.
It is a mature book, yeah. So
any reason you went that route? It just happened with the storyline?
It kind of has been that way since really early on. I kind of thought of it as being for older readers, kind of thing.
I remember the 2 issue, was it 17 or 18, where you had like an unrated one and you had the rated one, right?
Yeah, like, there's been a bit of that. So hang on a second here.
Sure.
My wife just downstairs rang the dinner bell. So it's like
oh, okay, yeah.
So I can hang on. Sure. I just need to text her that I'm on a podcast.
Well, tell her I said hello. Thank you for letting me borrow you for a few.
All right. All right. Hopefully that works. We'll see how that goes.
Well, regardless, people love you, so don't ever stop.
All right.
So you've hit on a lot of different genres in Savage Dragon. Is there a specific genre you would like to incorporate into the book? This is from Craig Olsen. In the future?
No. I don't even know how to begin that one. What would I don't even know what I would do at this point.
Well, you got to go with the legacy, right? So it's got to be the grandkids, jetpacks.
Well, the thing is, everybody's getting older, so it's like I kind of don't like doing imaginary stories or Futurama stuff, just because it just wastes time, and it also, doing future stuff kind of locks me in. And I just feel like, oh crap! Now that character has to be alive in 20 years. I mean, I had in an early issue, I had a flash forward. In issue 20, I just had a page that had it was before Malcolm is even born yet. I had a page of him in the future with Wildstar. And it was just like he's in a spacesuit, and it was like, what does this page even mean? And then a few issues later, Dragon had a son, and then sometime later still, I finally got to use that scene. But it was, a long time. It was
that's like freaking awesome.
Years and years and years and years. Like, I'm gonna finally pay this off 17 years later. And it's like that was a long ass time to pay something off like that. And
So Canadian Invincible Comics is saying let the guy have his dinner, Omar, which I'm going to. But before
I'll get around to that. Don't even.
But before I do, though, this is a good question that's been brought up in the chat a lot.
Movie.
Is there a Savage Dragon movie in the works? Come on.
No.
Somebody mentioned The Rock earlier.
He's way too tall, and there is no movie I can think of that he's ever been in where he's sat down and let himself be completely covered in makeup like that. He just doesn't do it. He's not one of those guys who's going to sit there and let himself be covered with makeup forever. He's just that's not what he does. So basically, what you would have to do is find somebody who can play the part, who facially I think looks like him. Do the face, do the fin, and just CGI his body. Just give him just blow that out. Because there's no, I mean, you can cast whatever muscle man you got, but they're never going to have a fist as big as their head, and they're never going to be as disproportionate as Dragon is. So why even struggle with that? Why not just go, let's just find a really good actor who's willing to put on the makeup. We'll put those little tags on their bodies so that we can replace their stuff, have them wear baseball mitts so when they're doing stuff, so they're having awareness of how big their hands are going to be.
Yeah.
And just do it that way. But at this point, I'm not out there actively pitching stuff. That is a grind, doing that. That means traveling a lot. That means going and knocking on a lot of doors and making those, pitches and trying to make that sale. And it's a long time, and it's a lot of effort. And you can end up with Barbed Wire or Howard the Duck or any number of movies that you go, this thing isn't helping your book at all. In fact, now people think Howard the Duck sucks when Howard the Duck was awesome, and it was this great comic. And now people, when you mention Howard the Duck, they don't think, hey, there's this great comic. They think, oh, there's this terrible movie. Remember that thing that just stunk up the place? And, I mean, Barbed Wire was what Barbed Wire was. The comic wasn't, I don't know, a huge comic. They got to turn it into a movie that didn't perform well. So now the comic's gone and the movie's long gone. And, for a while there, Elektra was a big thing. Now there's Elektra movie, and are people like, oh man, Elektra's awful.
I think
how much is there? How many? I mean, you can list the stinkers,
but you can also list the recent movies that have done really well, for these characters, right?
There's been some movies that have done really well, and that have been good movies too. And some things translate super well to the screen. Some things not so much. It can be all over the place.
Here's the thing, Eric, and before we wrap up, I'm going to say this. We need that Erik Larsen back in his 20s. The guy that was like, fuck yeah, I'm good. Why isn't anybody hiring me? That guy to pitch movies, to make Savage Dragon hardcovers, be like, yeah, people are going to buy these. It's Savage Dragon.
There's part of that that's still there and is there, and I want it, and I want all that stuff. You understand that I want all that stuff, but at the same time, my love is monthly comic. I love that monthly comic book thing, and I know that going out there and actively pitching a movie is going to take a chunk of time. And right now everything's closed anyway, so I can't do any of that stuff. But to go out there and actively pitch this and try to make this into a reality is going to take this chunk of time, which is going to be subtracted directly from the time I have to make my comic book.
Of course.
I got into this because I got into comics because I wanted to make comics. That was the goal. This was the goal. Having a comic book that came out for 28 years is, I mean, and who gets to do that? Nobody gets to do that, and I've gotten to do that, and it's been awesome, you know. So I don't have any complaints. And you know, if I'm sitting there watching a Savage Dragon movie, I'm going to be sitting there going, "That's not real. Sounds like that's not." It would just be so much me just bellying here.
Dude, that's until you get that first check. Then you're like, okay, I guess he kind of sounds like the dragon.
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine.
You're the man. You're the man.
You know, it'd be one thing if I was sitting there going, "Oh, I really, really need it," but it's fine. Yeah, I'm doing all right.
It's hard to imagine doing a character the way you wanted it to be done, you know, since 1992. That's insane, man.
It's been great, you know, and at this point, I'm sitting there writing and drawing my book, you know, a page at a time as I'm sitting here doing it. It's like I just drew a page. Now I'm writing that page. Now I'm doing the next page, and it's like anything can happen on the next page. It's like, oh, I felt like drawing a bunch of aliens showing up in the sky and him having characters having to deal with that. All right, there you go. Suddenly characters have to deal with this crap. It's like, where did that come from? I just felt like doing it. Whatever. Things happen. What this can't happen.
Not a lot of people can say that was a day's work. Not a lot of people get to say that the way that you wanted it done. Well,
yeah, no, that's been awesome.
At this moment, I just want to thank everybody for joining. Eric, keep doing your thing, I say. For joining us. Sir, I'd love to have you back, catch up whenever we release those hardcovers. You know I ain't gonna let you go from that. You know I'm not gonna stop bugging you. I'm there. I don't back out easy.
I would love to do it. I would love to see it. I don't know how many issues are missing in action. I think there are a few.
Really?
So in terms of like issues that would need to get either recolored or something, because there is a bit of material which is just kind of unavailable, but we'll find a way, you know.
Yeah. I ain't giving up, man. Everybody, thank you. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, where you can find Mr. Larsen's work up to 50% off of the price. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
All right.